is Indian Country Today.
Esquili, thank you for joining us. I'm Patty Tholahungva. Here are the headlines for Thursday, November 12th. Pfizer is on track to apply for the release of its COVID-19 vaccine. The approval would be under emergency use from the Food and Drug Administration. Pfizer says an early peek at its vaccine data suggests the shots may be 90% effective at preventing COVID-19. Authorities have stressed it's unlikely any vaccine will arrive before the end of the year, and limited initial supplies will be rationed. Native American communities have experienced among the highest rates of COVID-19 disease and death in the U.S. and continue to remain the least represented in studies of interventions that can prevent or treat COVID-19. This is the same vaccine that has been conducting clinical trials on the Navajo reservation. If the vaccine is approved, Navajo citizens would be among the first people eligible to receive the vaccine as part of the trial agreement. Congresswoman Deb Haaland is hoping to create a Native American Languages Resource Center. She introduced a bill designed to create a designated resource center for the protection and stability of Native American language education. Congress is funding 16 centers for foreign languages at various universities, but does not currently fund a center for Native American languages. However, the federal government has a trust responsibility to tribal nations. Such a center is needed because while there are more than 175 native languages spoken in America today, estimates say fewer than 20 will be spoken in just 30 years. Lakota activists set up a camp for homeless relatives in Rapid City, South Dakota last month, and the police shut it down. The response? The next day, they moved the camp to trust land just outside of town. The camp, built on traditional values and teachings, is flourishing. Stuart Huntington got an exclusive peek behind the scenes at this unique slice of urban Indian country.
It's just 4 miles from downtown of a modern American city, but it feels remote and timeless. They call it Camp Minaloosahan after the Lakota name for the creek that runs through town. It was built to shelter the homeless by volunteers and on the shoulders of ancestors.
They're giving the people a chance to have summers of sleep and live like they used to long time ago, are out like the ancestors, live under a teepee and learn your religious ways and all that, and they're doing a good thing, man.
The camp is perched on some 90 acres of land held in trust for the Cheyenne River, Rosebud, and Oglala Sioux tribes. It used to be part of the Rapid City Indian Boarding School. The camp grew out of the volunteer Creek Patrol effort to feed and protect unsheltered natives in Rapid City. Today it has the backing of the NDN Collective, and volunteers hope it has a rosy future. It got off to a rocky start. Just as the cold weather hit in October, 4 teepees went up on city property to shelter homeless residents. Organizers say it was peaceful.
You can watch some of the videos and you can hear the birds chirping, the kids laughing in the background, the adults sitting around visiting, just enjoying themselves. Then the police showed up and disrupted all of that.
The mayor called the camp illegal, and the police moved in to remove it.
If that teepee doesn't start coming down by 10:20, then this will become an unlawful assembly and people will go to jail.
6 people were arrested, including Bettelyoon, who wasted no time restarting the relief effort.
Well, we got out of jail. We came up here and found this place. The next day, the teepees went up. We lit the fire. The fire's been going since, and it's amazing.
The number of people living in the camp varies. When I was there in early November, 48 unhoused relatives called it home. Organizers were laying in firewood for the long winter and still making additions.
We also set up a sweat lodge, so we got some of the relatives that are choosing to sober up so they can take part and find that spirituality that maybe they lost or maybe they forgot, but it's slowly coming back.
In Camp Minaloosahan in the Black Hills, Stuart Huntington, Indian Country Today.
If you'd like to learn more about the camp, you can visit its website at campminahuzalan.org. NBC is getting into the Indigenous storytelling business by giving the green light for a pilot named Sovereign. Award-winning filmmaker Ava DuVernay is the executive producer alongside Cheyenne and Mescalero Apache citizen Bird Running Water. Running Water has supported more than 140 different Indigenous filmmakers through his work. The pilot was written in part by Navajo Nation citizen Sidney Freeland from a story by DuVernay. The groundbreaking project chronicles the lives of a large indigenous family struggling to control the future of their entire tribe. This marks the first time a Native American family drama has been developed for network television. And those are the headlines from Indian Country Today for Thursday, November 12th. I'm Patty Thalahungva. When we come back, a look at the struggle between the incoming presidential administration and the outgoing administration. Mark Trahant is the editor of Indian Country Today, and he's been watching the back and forth between the incoming Trump administration and the Biden administration and what that means for intertribal issues. Welcome back, Mark.
Thank you, Patty. Glad to be here.
Well, supporters of President Trump say the election is not over and that the media does not call elections, but we have seen elections called by networks and the AP for decades. So what's different now?
Well, the difference is Donald Trump. Yeah, there's been 100 years of elections being called by news organizations, and particularly the Associated Press, which is very thorough and almost entirely perfect. Not close, not exactly perfect, but pretty dang close. AP it's interesting because this morning, today, Thursday, President Trump issued a press release about the Trump campaign about winning Alaska, and they cited Alaska, the Associated Press calling the race. All of the ballots are not called in Alaska, or not counted in Alaska. It was a straight election call, so it was good enough. So part of it boils down to is election calls are good when you're winning, but not good when it's a state you're behind in. And so it's kind of a question of blaming the messenger rather than actually the message itself. We're down now to really the races are about a call this week. In fact, a lot of states are actually going through the certification process. Nevada starts tomorrow. And once that occurs, then the next step is to take the delegates to the Electoral College in December. And so the time is really running fast on what can be considered a called election or not, because soon they'll all be certified and they will be final.
And we're hearing pushback from some of the election officials in various states saying they worked really hard preparing, number one, for a pandemic and trying to get people to vote in person and safely in a pandemic. And now, they're saying we've never had widespread voter fraud and it's not happening this year. And they're starting to push back too.
Yeah, in fact, the New York Times did a survey of all the election officers in every state, so 50 different states. And all of them, Republican and Democrat, said not only are things working well, but this was a pretty smooth election. And what made it really remarkable is the turnout was so high that both Donald Trump and Joe Biden had more votes than any candidate in the history of the United States. Donald Trump second, obviously, and Joe Biden's first. That's a lot of ballots to handle. And for the most part, states did it pretty well. And what's really remarkable is you have states like Nevada and Arizona that were so close, and Georgia, where they had to handle all those ballots and keep up with a very, very close election. It's interesting because now one of the burdens on the Trump campaign is that they're having to study different state election laws. And Arizona is actually one of the toughest states in the country to get a recount. It has to be within 200 votes, and that's not going to happen. It's about this morning, 12,000. And not only that, but candidates in Arizona can't even ask for a recount. It has to be done by the state. Other states are a little more open to recounts. Georgia is now doing a hand recount. When you think about 6 million ballots being hand recounted, that's going to take some time, but that's kind of where they're at. And Nevada also has very strict processes. And again, Nevada will certify this race very closely, or very soon, this week, as a matter of fact.
It's just a very different reaction after the election and all these votes that are being counted. People are just waiting to see these results, and now we've got these results coming in. Very, very different from when Obama won and the election was over that night by 11 o'clock Eastern time, which was a very early election night. So, what other fallout do we have from looking at this resistance to accepting the vote and taking it to court?
Well, and the court cases are not serious. In testimony, for example, different folks have said, were there ballot people there present observing? And remember that lawyers are officers of the court, so they can't say the same thing they would tell the press. They actually have to answer the question. And in Pennsylvania, they said, yes, we did have people there, but they were 9 feet apart and we wanted them to be 6 feet apart. And that's the nuance of the argument. It's really bizarre. In court, the standard is produce evidence. And if you don't have the evidence, the judge is just going to move on. And it has to be evidence pursuant to election law. In most of the cases, the Trump campaign has put together a list of affidavits of people who say that they've seen something that's askew, but that's not evidence. And courts are not likely to accept that. They've got to have something more tangible. Interestingly, in Arizona, the evidence was so bad, which was a case of whether Sharpie pens can be used on the ballot or not, that the Trump campaign actually asked to have the evidence sealed because they didn't want anyone to see it.
Wow. Well, this is playing out and it is impeding the transition here. So let's talk a little bit about the key players in a transition when it comes to moving one president out of the White House and moving the new president into the White House.
So normally transitions are very methodical and they begin as early as possible. So the night of the election, normally, when the AP would call the race, the General Services Administration would issue a memo to prepare different cabinet agencies to be able to start the transition. It's really important, particularly for two things right now: national security and the pandemic. During 9/11, one of the findings of the 9/11 Commission was that the transition in 2000, which was Bush v. Gore, was so slow that it actually aided and abetted international groups like bin Laden trying to undermine the United States. The same case could be made for the pandemic, that there are some serious issues that need to be resolved right away, and having the government be in sync on these issues is really important. James, one of the senators from Oklahoma, Langford, basically said to the administration, if the Biden team is not getting briefings by Friday, he will intervene. He wants to have that resolved because security briefings are so important. And to have no transition is just beyond the pale. It's interesting how presidents have been involved when you get into the field of Indian affairs. In 1977, Jimmy Carter actually made a trip over to the Bureau of Indian Affairs and walked around. It was interesting because the acting director or commissioner of Indian Affairs was Ray Butler. But in the facility was Ben Rifle, a former Republican congressman, who was also willing to serve as an acting commissioner, but Carter fired him. And so he didn't stay around very long. You'll see a lot of the former leaders from the Obama administration take key roles. Keith Harper would be one right away. They announced over the weekend or yesterday that Kevin Washburn, the former Assistant Secretary for Indian Affairs, will actually head the Department of Interior transition. And the Department of Interior is actually one of the jobs where there's prospects for a Native American to serve in the cabinet. And that's never happened before. The only Native American in the cabinet before is Charles Curtis, who is vice president, not an actual operator of a cabinet agency.
It's so interesting to see this movement and then looking at the potential for a Native American to be a part of the cabinet or head one of the departments there that oversees this. So do you expect a lot of movement in this with the Biden campaign announcing more people in key positions in the next 7 days?
Yeah, I do. And partly because of the mechanics involved. So for a bunch of things to have to happen all at once, if you want to start your government on January 20th, when a cabinet leader is picked, they have to do what's called a full field FBI report. And that actually includes going back and interview people you knew in grade school all the way through your life to look for any potential issues. And then that field report goes to the Senate and they begin deliberations for confirmation hearings. And we won't know the makeup of the Senate until January 5th. All of this is like moving in really remarkable ways. But once that's determined, the Senate will try to have hearings between January 5th and January 20th so that all of the cabinet members can be confirmed as soon as possible afternoon on January 20th when the president takes office.
All right. Well, Mark Trahant, thank you so much for this update and getting us up to date on what's happening here. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And when we come back, an encore interview with comedy writer Joey Clift. Humor is something that has sustained Native people for centuries and through so many tragedies and sadness. And so today, as we find our way through this pandemic, humor is once again sustaining us. Joey Clift is Cowlitz, and he loved movies as a kid. Well, that love has taken him into the writing rooms for Nickelodeon and DreamWorks. For Indigenous Peoples Day, he partnered with Illuminatives to create a list of 25 Native American comedians to follow in 2020, which included a takeover of Comedy Central's Instagram account. Let's start by watching one of his most recent films here, and it's called Telling People You're Native American When You're Not Native is a lot like telling a bear you're a bear when you're not a bear.
Telling people you're Native American when you're not Native is a lot like telling a bear you're a bear when you're not a bear. If you tell a bear you're a bear when you're not a bear, you will get mauled by that bear. If you wear the traditional clothing of a bear when telling a bear that you are also a bear, you'll get mauled by that bear. If you tell a bear you're 1/16th bear, but you don't know what kind of bear, and you've never bothered to research your bear culture, and yet you think you have more right to an opinion about bear issues than the actual bear standing in front of you, you're gonna get mauled by that bear. If you make products with a bear's face on it, and even though you've made $1 billion off of it and the bear has clearly said they don't like it, and you don't give any of the money you've earned to bears in need until you're guilted into it decades after you started doing it, you and that bear are fine. Just kidding. You're gonna get mauled by that bear. If you tell a bear that lions are your spirit animal, you're gonna get mauled by that bear. And the lion. If you, a non-bear, make friends with a bear, learn their bear culture and language, and then get mad when the bear doesn't ask you to be a member of their bear clan or give you a bear naming ceremony, you're gonna get mauled by that bear. Also, bears don't have naming ceremonies, so that request is stupid. And if you tell people you're a bear, even though you know full well that you're not a bear just to get jobs and opportunities that are set aside for bears, you're gonna get mauled by a butterfly. The bear would maul you, but he's in a business meeting. Wait, meeting's over.
Hey, I thought we were not. Ouch, though!
So, in conclusion, if you're cool to Native Americans, you will not get mauled by a bear. The end. No white guys were harmed in the making of this short. That's us.
Well, Joey's next adventure now includes joining the all-native writing room for Netflix's brand new animated series, Spirit Rangers. Welcome to our program, Joey.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be on Indian Country today. I'm a big fan, and sorry that my short film name is so long. It's like the Fiona Apple album title of short film names. It's 24 words long.
Well, and even the title is funny, right? You know, as we're looking at this pandemic, and as we're talking about trying to get through the pandemic and using humor, how did your writing change in this pandemic?
So yeah, I mean, the pandemic has definitely been, it's definitely had a big effect on, a lot of things in the world, and probably the smallest on the list is my writing process. The way that it's changed is. Prior to this, when I would be working on a show, I would, go into a writer's room, sit in an office, usually eat a lot of, free snacks from the office kitchen while, cracking jokes in a room full of people. And now, instead of doing that, I do most of my writing just, kind of at my apartment, and most of my meetings are, on Zoom or on some video chat. So there's a little bit more I would say that the way that my writing process has changed for meetings is now I am hyper aware of how messy my room is at any given time. So I'm just like, oh, that closet door's open. Oh, nobody should see that. Oh, my bed's messy. So I would say that that's become a big part of my writing process, is making sure I don't look like a slob.
Well, you and everyone else who now have to Zoom from home here, and isn't that true? You know, we don't realize how much we miss that water cooler talk. You know, those little coffee breaks that we have when we're in an office with a lot of people, and I would imagine comedy writers especially really feed off of that energy of one another.
Oh yeah, like it's so much of us came up through kind of like live comedy spaces where we would do shows together and we would, riff on stage and, make an audience crack up. And like it's still there over Zoom a little bit, but like sometimes we'll kind of accidentally step on each other's jokes just because there's like a latency and a lag. And it's also different a little bit. A lot of stand-up shows and comedy shows are over video chat now, so it's kind of the same deal of like, oh, instead of like driving to a comedy theater at midnight on a Tuesday to do a show, I'm just sitting in my dark room and just being like, I really want to go to bed right now, but I have to do this show.
Wow, it's a very different world here. So you're going to be writing for Netflix's Spirit Ranger series. How is this production different from other Netflix series?
So the way that this production is different from other Netflix series is that for the first time ever in the history of animated TV in the United States, it's an all-native writers' room, and it's just a very like native forward show in kind of like how I look at all aspects of storytelling for the show. And it's I would say the way that it's different from a lot of other writing jobs that I've had. Usually when I'm working in rooms, in writers' rooms, I'm the only native on staff. So because of that, and because, as we know, it's like your average person probably doesn't know as much about natives as they maybe probably should. Whenever I would pitch like native jokes, storylines, or anything like that to like a non-native writer's room, I would usually have to start every pitch by establishing, first things first, I was born in a hospital, not a cave. My mom is not an eagle. And, because it's an all-native writer's room, we can just kind of jump into it. Everybody knows what smudging is. Everybody knows what fry bread is. We're all aware of like, like a lot of, we're all aware of like, a lot of like native lore and stuff like that. So we can just get to like the heart of the stories and the meat of like what makes these stories great. So, I think that that's something that I really, appreciate and cherish about this experience. And I've got to shout out the creator, showrunner, Spirit Ranger, Carissa Valencia. She's a genius Shumash animation writer. She's doing great stuff. She put this team together, and she's really created a great space for us to, I think, make some cool stuff.
Well, it sounds like working on this series with an all-native writing team, it means a lot to you.
Yeah, it's like we throw the word special around a lot, kind of like in the writer's room, and that like this really just does feel like a special experience. Like for me personally, if you'll notice on the deadline announcement for the show, we have the blessings of the Shumash tribe and the Cowlitz tribe we have the blessings of the Shumash tribe and the Cowlitz tribe to kind of create the show and to create a lot of these characters. So I'm Cowlitz. What that means is I went to my tribal council and like pitched to them the idea of potentially having a Cowlitz character in the show. And my tribal council was completely on board for it. And like, that's something that's like, not just like professionally cool, but also just like personally and culturally, like probably one of my top 5, not just like career moments, but like life moments to get to do that. And to be able to kind of like, bring not just my people and my stories, but, like other folks, other tribes, like, stories and things like that kind of like into the mainstream. So I'd say that, we're all comedy writers making goofs, but like the ability to kind of tell our stories is just like an added thing that makes it 5 million times more cool,
Right. So we're really looking forward to seeing the series. When can we actually start watching it? And without giving too much away, kind of give us a synopsis.
Oh yeah, totally. So Spirit Rangers is a fantasy adventure preschool series following Native American sibling trio Kodiak, Summer, and Eddie Skycedar, who have a shared secret. They're Spirit Rangers. Spirit Rangers can transform into their own animal spirit to help protect the national park that they call home. And once again, the show's created by Carissa Valencia. She's an amazing Shumash writer, and she's showrunning the show, and she's great. The release date, I would say, let's see, how do I say this without getting fired by Netflix? It's usually when shows are announced, it's kind of when they're closer to the start of their production than the end of their production. So, the show's definitely currently in production right now. So release date, I would say TBD, but it'll be out soon, and we'll be dropping news and stuff about it as we progress.
Okay. Are there any res dogs making an appearance?
Okay. No comment.
Okay. Well, we really appreciate you being here, and we look forward to that. So keep in touch, and we'll let our viewers know when they can start watching this series on Netflix.
Of course.
So thank you so much for joining us, Joey Clift.
Oh, yeah, thanks for having me. And for the record, I love res dogs. Res dogs are great.
Very good. And thank you for watching. Take care of yourselves. Your life is precious. I'm Patty Thalhungva. Join us again tomorrow.
You got to take a stand just because you know you can. Oh, you got to run, you got to run.
Indian Country Today is recorded at the Phoenix Indian School Visitor Center in Phoenix, Arizona.
This is Indian Country Today.